Welcome back to Electrons Dance, sometimes known as Ken's Nostalgia Channel. When I started out in electronics, everything was built with through-hole boards and components. Here's an old transistor radio from the 1960s, not too different from the ones I took apart out of curiosity as a kid. You can see that to pack everything into a convenient handheld unit, the relatively bulky components are in narrow radial packages wherever possible. And some actually parts such as these resistors are stood on end with a special lead bend. Surface mount technology was already around in some cutting edge stuff in the 1960s, but even in the 1980s it still accounted for very little of the electronics market. When I started designing electronics around that time, through-hole designs still dominated the production landscape in commercial electronics. Here's a video game board from that era, in this case populated largely by dual inline package integrated circuits. And note that some of the more expensive ICs are socketed for easy replacement. Here's a control board I designed for air conditioning systems on transit buses, which was still being built in the 2010s. Board layout was pretty easy since components were fairly sizable. Lead spacing allowed plenty of space between circuit traces, and hey, every component lead was also a via, providing access to every circuit layer. Prototyping was easy too, since components were large enough to handle, stayed in place once inserted, and thus could be easily soldered by hand. Manufacturing was fast and efficient. Even the beat-up automatic insertion equipment our small company used could place several components per second. And so, back in the 90s, I said I would have to be drugged kicking and screaming into the world of surface mount design. I have almost quit screaming. By the turn of the century, I had a little experience designing surface mount boards, but still used through-hole components wherever I could. While most of the electronics world had moved on to surface mount, my employer's bread and butter was still through-hole well into the 2000s, but we always knew the tidal wave was coming. Even in the 90s, some newer components were only available in surface mount. For a while, parts available in both through-hole and surface mount versions were cheaper in through-hole, but costs were gradually shifting in favor of surface mount. Remember that bulky HVAC control board from the 1990s? Around 2011, new features justified a total board redesign. By then, even our little backwater company was using mostly surface mount. There was no need to miniaturize everything since the board outline didn't need to change. So most of the 2-pin components such as resistors, capacitors, and diodes were in relatively large surface mount packages such as 0805, not much smaller than the equivalent axial parts in my older designs. This is the surface mount version still being built today. Let's compare some resistors in various packages. A typical quarter-watt through-hole part, an 0805 surface mount package like I used to use a lot, an 0603 surface mount part I usually use now, and some 0201 surface mount parts which are too dang small for this old dog to work with. Tiny surface mount passives like these 0201 resistors and capacitors are so small they're often called grain of sand components. I think you can see why. But to emphasize the point, let's make an old hourglass style timer with some resistors. Well, that's the end of one reel. It's actually going to take several reels to get enough resistors to do what I want to do. Before I sneeze and lose most of these, I'm going to put them into my hourglass container. Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives.